Welcome to this particular webinar where we're really going to focus on talking about what young workers want and specifically looking at, strengthening the talent pipeline for the energy services sector. We're pleased to be able to offer this webinar along with sort of a whole series on the attraction and retention of talent. And we're trying to focus on the energy services sector as much as possible. This webinar, as well as the other workshops and webinars we've done in this space, is possible thanks to funding from the Alberta government. So I am kind of wearing two hats today, certainly here representing Enserva, who I have the pleasure to work with on, the talent file in particular. But I'm also here as part of the Talent for Energy team. And really, the Talent for Energy team, we are very much focused on connecting energy employers with talent. And so for this particular webinar, we're going to share some of our insights we've gained on the work that we've done focused on attracting and retaining and advancing young talent into the energy industry. So I'm going to, in a couple of minutes, I'm just going to get the rest of the Talent for Energy team to introduce themselves. But just to sort of cover off what we're going to do within this webinar, I'm going to spend a little bit of time just setting the stage in terms of why this is an important topic. And I think you probably already know that's why you're here. But also a little bit about what we have heard in our research from young talent. Then we're going to have the pleasure to hear from three panelists that are actually on the ground doing this work, either, in, attracting and retaining talent and young talent, or are young talent in the energy services sector themselves, or certainly engaging in other activities that is an opportunity to hear what they're hearing on the ground from young talent and how they might perceive the energy services sector. Going to wrap up with a bit of an overview of a toolkit that we've developed, and I will just say that we will provide all these slides as well as the toolkit to everybody who is on the call. So stay tuned for that at the end of the webinar. So as I promised, I'm going to have have the rest of the Talent for Energy team introduce themselves. So Cheryl.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Delighted to be here. My name is Cheryl Knight. I've been working in the energy industry, specifically on talent strategies for so long you wouldn't even consider me in the grouping of young talent, as I'm sure everybody else is. So delighted to be here, and my role is I'm going to be your facilitator for the panel.
Great, thanks. And Parker?
Yeah, hi, I'm Parker Smith. I've been working with Talent for Energy for just over 3 years now. I do a lot of the project coordination and kind of behind the scenes stuff and supporting Pat and Cheryl's vast knowledge in the area any way I can.
Great, thanks. Okay, a little bit about why this topic is important. And I guess, like I said, you're here because you already consider this an important topic. I'm absolutely sure of that. But I think probably more now more than ever, we are seeing that attracting and retaining young talent is really critical to advancing Canada's ambition around becoming a major player in the global supplier of energy. Sorry, I'm just going to clear my throat. some will say that we're on the cusp of a generational opportunity to really enhance Canada's role as we look at, the whole concerns related to energy security and backfilling some of the disruption that's happened in terms of energy supply. So certainly that makes it important for us to ensure that we are filling the talent pipeline because what the data is telling us, and this is not new and not a surprise because we know that Canada's labor force certainly has been aging with time. And some of the data, on the slide shows that, within the total Canadian labor force, about 35% of the total labor force is under 34, whereas 65% are over 35, and many of those are nearing retirement age. So just understanding where the labor force is at, really is important. And we're not the only sector that is in this space of needing to be able to attract and retain the best and brightest talent to help us in terms of our goals as an energy industry. But I think also in comparison, when you look at the age demographic of the energy workforce, this is in total, not just the energy services, our demographics are even more challenging as we see a much older demographic, certainly over 35. But if you look at the chart that's there, over 45 is still pretty scary in terms of the number of workers and the amount of experience that is potentially eligible for retirement. So something we really need to pay attention to. I just want to point out that the source of that chart on the slide is Careers in Energy. And really, they have a lot of other labor market information and workforce analysis on their website specifically for the energy industry. And so if you are, looking for some of that data, I really encourage you to check them out. And I think that there are some of them that are on the call today too. So that's great. We want to kind of anchor this conversation with a poll. And so I think you're probably all familiar with Slido, but if you could participate in the poll simply by using the QR code to access the poll. And then we'd just like to get a sense from your perspective. What do you think are the factors young talent considers to be most important when choosing a career? So I will get you to start that, and you can choose up to 3.
Hey, Pat, not sure if it's just me as a user, but I only have an option to select one. So
Oh.
No, if you actually select one and then it keeps going.
You can hit submit and then submit
Yeah.
another one. That's what I had to do. Yeah.
Oh,
3 times, up to 3 times you submit it each time.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't know that was how that worked. Give a few more seconds because I see how many of responded, and I know how many of you are in the room, so I'll give you a few more seconds. Maybe we've stalled out here. Okay. Let's see. So compensation and benefits certainly up there. Interesting work and work-life balance, all getting all high on the priority list. Environmental and social responsibility, career development. Okay. Oh, job security. All right. Interesting. Anybody have any comments in terms of just how they, sort of ranked or anything about their choices that they want to share? Well, then we'll
You can
move
always
on.
feel free to put a comment. You can always feel free to put a comment in the chat too, because I know people are probably eating and coming online and on camera to talk with a mouthful might be a little hard, but feel free to put a comment in if you would like to talk about why you chose what you chose to.
I'll just add, if I may, I thought that work-life balance would be higher, to be honest. Just everything you hear about the younger generation of not being as dedicated to the work, etc. So that was interesting to me.
Thanks, Stephanie. We did actually do a very similar survey, our poll, with some young talent, in fact, some young engineering students that we met with in the fall. So we had the opportunity to present, believe it or not, in Ontario on Canada's evolving energy industry, and had an opportunity to meet with over 100 engineering students from across the post-secondary institutions in Ontario. And so we did kick off the workshop that we did with them with the poll that we just shared with you. And these were the results that we saw, and how they answered. And even though I would say that even though this was with that particular group, the Ontario engineering students, it really does sort of quantify what we've also heard qualitatively in a number of focus groups we've done with, again, young talent across the energy industry, including some interns. So, I mean, I think what I find very interesting is that, there was a lot of similarities between how you answered the poll and what we were hearing from young people. So it was a little bit different with them because we asked them to rank what was most important to them. And then we asked them a second question around which of these factors are in their top three. So again, interesting work right up there. Compensation and benefits. Work-life balance actually was very high in terms of their.
I do apologize for interrupting you. Just back to the first one, the interesting work. We do have a comment asking, did anyone define interesting work? This can be a subjective factor, and I do apologize for interrupting.
I'll let Cheryl and Parker jump in here too if they have anything else to expand. Not a lot in terms of, I think that you're absolutely right. Everybody's perspective on interesting work is there. But I think, I think what we really heard as well, and it might be a little bit connected to that having an impact on people's daily lives, but a lot of them were very interested in understanding the whole area around energy sustainability and trying to be, looking at future focused, trying new things, being innovative. Those were a lot of sort of things that were related to some of the interesting work. Like I said, Cheryl, Parker, I don't know if you have anything to add to that in terms of how students were defining interesting work.
I think the comment, the question also has the answer in that it is subjective, and that's exactly what we were looking for from an individual's perspective. What motivates them when it comes to work and energy? And that interesting work came out ahead of compensation and benefits is different than it might have 10, 15 years ago. So that's a lever for employers to, when they're, at job fairs, when they're building their websites, their career sections of their websites, to highlight that as a hook and an attraction mechanism.
I think one of the things that we were surprised about was where the environmental and social responsibility sort of landed on this list. Because I think there are some perceptions around that, or certainly we had some perceptions in terms of where that might fit in terms of what's important to young talent. And yet, that sort of, you as an audience also, put it, in fact, I think you put it 14% as well. So I'd just like to hear, what are others hearing in terms of, young people's, the importance of that environmental and social responsibility piece in terms of a career, and if you're seeing any shifts around that. Any comments? And then I'll have to rely on you because I can't see everybody.
So Joel, did you have a comment there? And then
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in if others don't want to take that one. I think a big thing that we discussed when we were talking about this before, Pat, that is very relevant and true is that young people entering the workforce now have never lived in a world where ESG and DEI are not core narratives. And so a lot of them, when they're ranking these lists, it's not that they don't think they're important, it's that they think they're assumed. They believe every company will do these well, and that's an expectation they have if they're joining any organization.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that.
And actually, just to tag on to Joel's comment there, I mean, we've been running our next gen, hiring programs as we look for new engineers in the workforce. And a couple of the assessment centers that we've been running over the last couple of years, they're coming in with questions on what is Weatherford doing from a social responsibility piece. What is, and a lot of these pieces, I was a little bit surprised about the leading edge technology not being higher, but they're asking those questions. And like Joel said, they're assumed or they're expecting that their new employer is already there. And so what can they do to highlight that? So, yeah.
Yeah. I would agree with both those comments. And I think the other thing we heard, and maybe this was more from, the young talent that's already in the industry, is that they aren't expecting perfection from companies. They know that this is, addressing environment and balancing it with social and economics and energy security now is very complex. But they do want to see progress. They want to understand what companies are doing to progress those factors, and yeah, just being sort of transparent around that. Now, I know there's some regulations that kind of came into place that makes some of that communication hard, but again, that just not expecting perfection, but expecting to understand what companies are doing and that they are genuinely trying to progress those pieces. Any other comments or surprises in terms of, sort of what we've heard is important to young talent?
Just going to put a further point on your comments there, Pat, because I completely agree, and I think maybe one of the things I feel the tide is turning a little bit, and one of the things we could get better at, just as an industry at large, is not trying to sell on the merits of ESG, because I think it comes across maybe a little bit disingenuous at times, and that could be a deterrent for young people, right? And so, obviously, extremely difficult to balance the comments you made about like showing how you're making improvements and kind of where the industry is and where your organization is, but just a thought on that.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. So just to move on, I would say that, like I said, we sort of kicked off the workshop we did with this particular group with a poll. We did a bit of a workshop on, just how, Canada's energy industry is transforming, and, the broader definition of sustainability, taking into account the environment, social, economics, energy security. And then we wrapped up with a question around their thoughts on an energy career. And so again, saw that there was, real potential. Again, we're in Ontario, which again, kind of thought that we might see some different thoughts in terms of an energy career. And I know that these don't necessarily translate into behaviors around actually applying for jobs and that kind of stuff, but I think it really gives us a sense of, as Ryan was saying, where some of the opportunity is, because we certainly heard, a lot of interest in, in either an energy career or understanding more about an energy career. And I would say that our number one question during the workshop was around, from the students, how do I find out more about co-ops, internships, summer job opportunities within the industry? And so, like I said, and I think that, with Jacqueline and Joel's comments, just there seems to be a bit of a shift and perhaps an opening in terms of the opportunity for the energy industry to to provide the information that young people are looking for around what the career opportunities are here. On that note, I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl and the panel.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So this gives you a little bit of an idea of who's on the panel. So it is young talent in energy, or those who can speak about young talent in energy. So we're going to have a bit of a conversation first, and then we'd like you to think about any questions you have immediately following the panel, because we'll open it up to a Q&A section right after the panel rather than at the end of the presentation, because we know people are getting back to meetings. So we'll do the Q&A right after the panel, so keep your questions in mind. So let me start with Ryan, and then we'll go to Alina and then Joel. So just by way of introducing yourself, tell us a little bit about your perspective or your point of view, where you sit on this issue of young talent and energy, and any general reactions that you might have had to the data that Pat presented regarding your experiences in energy services. So anything interesting, going well, where's there room for improvement? Ryan, if you could kick us off, please.
And Ryan, I'm just going to remind you to try and speak a little bit louder. Just you're a little soft still, okay?
Certainly. Thank you, Cheryl. I'm Ryan Capri. I've been very fortunate. I went through SAIT's technology program, so I kind of got a bit of a feel for what the service sector and what the producer side of the industry looked like. And then upon graduation from university, worked with upstream chemical company and hydraulic fracturing company for 3 years, at which point I transitioned over to the producer side of things. So that's a little bit of my background. Referencing the poll specifically there, Cheryl, I found the interesting work aspect quite intriguing. Something that I just noticed from my own personal experience, like when I was working for service companies, I had a very good experience, but it wasn't evident to me, or I would say like effectively like sold, not maybe not sold, that might not be the right word, but it wasn't shown or demonstrated to me what potential avenues could be for engineers or technologists. The impression I kind of get is very much like we are a service company, we are based in the field, but I don't want to say backbone because you need both hands there, but the technical aspect of the industry and the value that that brings to people like me now that are working with a producer seems to be really understated. Coming back to interesting work, while it's super subjective, that to me that's something that really speaks to meaning in your work, and I think that's really important for young professionals.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. And we'll follow back on some of those comments in the other questions. So, Alina, you are working squarely within energy services. So maybe just highlight what your perspective, your point of view is, and any general reactions you'd like to share from the introductory slides. Alina.
Okay, hi. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
So I am Alina, and I also graduated from SAIT, and I did the Petroleum Engineering Technology program. And I'm currently working with PureChem Services as a lab tech. Yes, so one thing I found interesting, I would say, is the age gap. So the demographics show it, we know it, but it is something that stands out, and yet there is a big, huge gap, of course. And from my experience being in SAIT, well, we had our SBE, I would call it the student chapter. So it's called Student Petroleum Society for SAIT, and I was the president, and I've been fortunate to be the president. So I going through that, and then now being in the industry, I noticed that how there is an uncertainty about the long-term career pathways, and there are a lot of misconception about the industry culture. So being a student, being in the club, reaching out to students, I noticed that is really evident. And once you go into the industry, you would see that there are a lot of uncertainty, still is a lot of uncertainty. And one thing I feel like that companies should take into like think about a bit more. I mean, we do have a lot of mentorships and internships going on, but there should be more student engagement and more of technology-driven operations that should take place, at least from where I stand. And one room of improvement I can see is communication between a company and students going through the industry. So we know that they are next in line for the industry, but as I said, having an uncertainty and misconception going on, it would be great if we have a bit more of visibility and communication taking place between the industry and students. Yeah.
And that's great insight, Alina, to hear from somebody who's earlier in their career, I'm guessing, than the other panelists, and in the industry as opposed to the students that we heard about in the survey. So great tips for employers on the things to pay attention to and that they can emphasize. So Joel, coming back to you, your perspective where you sit is a little bit different. Tell us a bit about that and any reactions that you have to the data and what you see as going well, and any things that you're working on to improve things.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Cheryl, and also Anna, Pat, and Parker for all the work setting up this call. I really appreciate that. So I work in human resources. I'm an HR business partner with Weatherford, so we're an oil field services company. I focus specifically on Canada, working with both our operations managers as well as the frontline staff. So I'm a little bit more involved, I guess, with our younger folks. Like Jackie had mentioned, we have our Next Gen program here. So engineers and others that are just breaking into the industry, setting up their career path from their early stages when they first launch it. Looking at the poll, I think that Alina and Ryan both had some really good insights, so I don't want to repeat anything they've said. One area that I definitely noticed where we on the call differed from the survey was the impact on people's daily lives. That was, I think, 44% had said on the Young Talent survey that that was important to them, versus on our call here, nobody had noted that one. So I think it's important for us to make sure we have that narrative involved when we're talking to young people. Things like energy security are very top of mind right now. It hasn't maybe been thought about as much until recently. And then also just expanding on the different industries that we have within energy, that it's not just oil. You impact people's daily lives from everything from the clothing they're wearing to natural gas that powers their homes. We now also are drilling for things like lithium, potash, uranium. We really, anything that is drawing power touches our industry. And so every time you're turning on a light, starting your car, you really do have that impact on people's lives. And I think sometimes that can get lost in the shuffle of a busy day.
Yeah, and if I could, Alina, put you a little bit on the spot as somebody that is new to industry and also working with new entrants through SPE. What do you think about Joel's comment with respect to how important it is for people to do work where they are impacting people's daily lives? If you could just unmute Alina and just give us your off the top of your head reactions.
Okay, so do you mind going through the question just once more? Sorry.
The impact on daily lives. It didn't come up in the poll. Joel is saying that he thinks, and he's seen from the work that he does at Weatherford, that it's important. So I guess I'm wondering from your perspective, when you work in the energy industry, do you think about how the industry itself has an impact on people's lives, access to, cheap, affordable, not cheap, if you look at the prices today, affordable, accessible energy. How important do you think it is from your perspective and people you work with in the SBE?
I feel like having a field exposure is really like important for professional growth. So the reason I say that is studying like a petroleum, and then it is totally different once you get into the actual field. So by field, I mean like in the company, in the office, but also having to know what you actually do in the company impacts what is actually done. Like how are you impacting what is done in the field is really important. So like at least for me, now that I work in a lab, I talk to people who are working in the field. I am fortunate enough to be able to go into the field. I see where our samples are taken from. I am able to know, okay, so what is happening next? So what am I doing? And knowing this is really helpful for me. And I feel like for everyone that's working with me. Once we know this, we are having a really big impact on the people and everyday life. Like you really wouldn't know that once you're just studying. I'm saying studying because I just graduated, and then yeah, that I keep on saying that. Anyway, so yeah, so as a student, you wouldn't really understand it, but once you work and then once you are having a hands-on exposure, I would say, and it's like you're ready to take opportunities and you're like ready to take the responsibility because you know what you're doing is actually having a great impact. So yes, I would say that having an exposure in the long term it's really good for students, for people who are still working, who have never been in the field, who don't know what they're actually doing. They know they're doing something on their part, but having a wider exposure, I think, is really important.
And that's a really, really good thing that you've highlighted, Alina. And maybe I'll go to Ryan here just to get him to piggyback on what you just said, because Ryan moved from energy services to a producer company. So maybe you could reflect on that value of field experience, Ryan, and how it's contributed to your skills, career development, and how you approach your work at Canadian Natural.
Yeah, certainly. I did just want to touch really quickly on the having an impact comment there too, though, because it's funny because on my side of the world, like working with a producer now, we still have that problem just working with operations, right? It's like operations is very siloed from engineering, and so especially being in production, a big part of my job is merging that and showing what becomes of that, like the work that you're doing in the field, the value that is created as a result of that, and then how that rolls up. And so it's not just like when I spoke to kind of the gap earlier, or maybe the maybe not a clear demonstration of interesting work in the service sector side, right? It's not something that's just specific to to the service sector. I think it just manifests in different ways depending on what part of the industry you're in. With regards to the value of field work, I have a couple thoughts. I think it's a great screening tool, to be honest, with candidates. I've hired interns before for producers, and you just get a feel for it, right? Like, I can appreciate that some young professionals maybe don't want to be in the field for their entire career. Um, but the ones that aren't willing to really give it an honest effort and like not have an immediate timeline in terms of when they need to head back, a lot of times I've found they're just not quite as invested. And it's funny because in my own experience, I originally had those thoughts. I remember when I first graduated, it was like I want to do a year or 2 years and then head to Calgary. But I found that my personal and professional growth in the field was just exponential, from one, learning how to merge those two aspects from the field to the office like we spoke to, but also just from the communication standpoint as well. I mean, I don't think anyone has had a very successful career that isn't able to communicate effectively. And when you're working in the field, you work with so many different and interesting individuals as well. And especially for someone growing up in the city like myself, it gave me an opportunity to learn how to connect and communicate and work with those people, because they are the backbone of the service sector, the producers. Like, it doesn't matter what side of the industry you are on. It is the backbone that gets everything done.
Well, and that's good that you raised that point, Ryan, because what I was thinking about is we've been talking um, quite a bit about engineers, and we all know that there's far more of other occupations in energy services than engineers. And so I find it interesting that you took from your field experience a better understanding of who's doing what in the field and how to communicate with them. So I'm sure that's paid off in your production operations role at Canadian Natural. So cool. Now, Joel, tell us what I guess your pitch maybe is, or your point of view is about field work and how it's an attraction or retention tool at Weatherford, and what are the benefits? Why should people, as Ryan said, be patient and understand that there's a big payoff there?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, the best way to learn is hands-on. You talk to so many people that say they learn by doing, and so we would like for them to get out and do. And when somebody goes out as an engineer in the field, they're not typically starting on engineer work. They're going to learn what the operators are doing first. They're going to learn what the different technicians might be doing. And that's really important, so that if they do eventually get in that job in Calgary or elsewhere where they're in the office, they understand the hands-on, they understand what's actually happening on site when things are going wrong or going right, and they can provide a bit more input that way. It also really helps you build rapport. When you're going to be leading a team down the line, which a lot of engineers will be, it's important that you understand everybody's job, and that they also know that you at least get the fundamentals of their job, so that they can feel like you're a reliable partner. So we really like to have our engineers get their start in the field, or at least get that exposure to the field, just so they do have that background before they progress into other roles in other parts of the organization.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan or Joel, you mentioned leading a team. And do you feel that having field experience, or maybe even Ryan can speak to this as well. Do you feel that having field experience and connecting those dots, as all of you have mentioned, understanding, who does what, the bigger picture, does that lead to a leadership role uh, better or more quickly, if I could use those terms, Joel, then Ryan, or me, Alina, if you have any reactions to that?
I don't know if I would say more quickly, but I would say that we find that there's more success when you get there. It allows you to understand the perspectives more and solve problems better. I think that everybody gets there in their own time. And I would also preface it and say that we don't consider only our managers or our supervisors to be leaders. Everybody can be a leader in their own respect within their job. And so even if you don't have a title or direct reports, you're still expected to operate as a leader in the way that you behave and the way that you interact with your coworkers. So even as a new grad engineer, there are ways in which you're leading a team pretty quickly. So it's not just the managers, but it's everybody that's involved in the whole project.
Okay, great. Ryan or Alina, anything to add to that question of field experience and the benefits of it, and maybe what you hope to get from it from your own perspective?
Yeah, totally. I guess quick comment on the leadership role specifically. I don't, like personally, I don't think leadership as a like management has the pull that used to, right? We come back and we talk about interesting work. Career development was on there, but it wasn't in your top three, right? And um, that's something that happens with time. And I'll just be candid. I think like one of the biggest things that we've missold this entire generation on is that like you can manage and define your whole career like from the beginning. And it's like, that's not true. I don't think like you figure that out as you go. And if you're that individual that shows up, those opportunities are presented to you. And I think that that presentation of opportunities like I do if I can reflect it I guess and compared to maybe your next gen program Joel just or some of the ideas behind it but at CNR I really like the way that they structure it in the sense that it's like you do a field rotation because these are the opportunities and these are the things that you're going to grow and learn through that experience and then you'll kind of maybe try something else and it's not entirely defined but there's those touch points that are linked between well once you have this core skill set there are many opportunities here in the field where you can move into a leadership or a more technical role but there's also avenues to sales like if your preference is more like the human interaction component or right maybe more on the technology specific like you're like doing pump or like gas lift design specifically to Weatherford, but obviously every single service provider is going to have those technical specialties, and that line is not often well communicated or even shown as an option. At least that has been my experience.
Great, thanks. Alina, would you like to add anything at this point?
Yeah. All I can add is that field experience for a young professional will give them credibility, I would say, which then, as mentioned before, can help them transition into leadership or technical or office-based roles. So I think it is definitely important. So just wanted to add that in for as a transition, as mentioned before. But
Good, thank you. So we just got into the topic of leadership or management. So I would like to understand your perspective on being managed or how you advise managers, I guess from Joel's perspective. What would you offer to managers here in the webinar about what they can do to create an environment where individuals, especially young talent, can excel? What is it that you want from managers or you would like them to do more of? Let's go to Brian, then Alina, and then Joel on the company perspective.
I think for me, and this is just universally, I prefer to be managed in with positive reinforcement. I think one of the big things that we often overlook is that not that you should be positively reinforced for doing the bare minimum, right? But people show up and they take the extra step when they are appreciated and they're recognized. And I don't think it has to be anything major. And I think if it's like scripted, that come across as disingenuous. But I think that really helps individuals and myself included in those moments where you maybe don't feel super great or you're having a hard time at work or maybe you just like I remember when I first was in the field like I felt just totally in not in my own skin at all because I didn't know how to communicate. I didn't know how to work with people and it was very easy to get in my own head and it's not an easy place to get out of either, right? And like anything, I think you're either always on a continuous upward spiral or you're on a continuous kind of downward spiral. There is no like staying even keel, relative speaking. And so those little words of encouragement, either it just be day to day or if the individual went above and beyond and just in just a small aspect goes a long way and it provides a lot of that sense of meaning that we touched on earlier, and then that just starts to snowball.
Great. Um, very, very interesting and very useful that, you know, if you're in your head, you're not completely comfortable in your environment. You need that manager to anchor you to something that connects with what's going right, what's going well to you and what you've done. That gives you, I guess, I'm going to say, confidence and incentive to repeat that, you know, that in the future, that behavior. So cool. Alina, what do you, in your work experience, what do you look for or want from a manager for you to be able to truly be your best?
So from my point of view, I feel like feeling comfortable in the workplace where you are able to ask questions and learn and grow. So clear communication where like I will be able to talk to my manager and ask, okay, so what does success look like where I am? How can I, as mentioned, grow from what I do? And what are the other opportunities that are available that exist for advancement? So also, as Ryan mentioned, recognition, I would say, matters a lot. Even like small feedbacks or acknowledgements does have a significant improve. Like it improves a person, a young professional, to get motivated and to show retention. It will help them a lot. So I would say young professionals like they will stay where they are if they feel valued, if they feel supported, and they're able to grow. Um, Yep, because like as shown in the survey that we had earlier, I would say like compensation and benefits was number two ranked among students and also work-life balance. So having career development as the fourth. So I feel like if you're appreciated in in what you do, if you feel valued, you feel supported, you are able to, as mentioned, ask questions and learn even more than just what you do. That can really help, and it's one of the biggest things that helps a young professional feel comfortable with, and that's one of the benefits like a manager will be able to provide, I would say.
Great. I mean, I find it interesting that you reinforce the in the moment feedback, not structured, not formalized, that Ryan did as being important, but you also went back to your point about understanding a career path. You know, if you excel, if you're interested in something in particular, how do you move forward in your career? So that sets you up, Joel, to talk about what you do relative to what Ryan and Alina said, or what you're hearing from your own employees.
Yeah, this is the space I live in most days is talking with managers about this sort of conversation. They both said it, but I want to quickly restate the importance of the feedback piece, both positive and constructive. And the big thing is real-time feedback. It's great that we do, you know, semi-annual, quarterly performance reviews, but if an employee has a great day and the manager notices it, them just ending their day hearing how well they performed is going to make them excited to come to work again tomorrow. And so being very real time with that feedback is important. And then also explaining the why. I think that a lot of times, again, tying back in with the idea of wanting to feel like your work is meaningful, showing how it impacts other teams within your organization, not just broader society, but even just within your group, how for a new graduate working, how their job is going to make somebody else's job down the line easier and how they can make that impact is really important. I think that every relationship between a manager and employee, there's sort of an unwritten code, and it's different for each relationship. And typically, I think managers have the mindset that they want to be as hands-off as possible. They want to give the employee the freedom to be their own person, do things their own way. They don't want to micromanage. And all that is great. But sometimes for the employee, they do want that extra little bit of a touch point so that they know what the rules are and they know what success looks like. Especially for a young person, it's important to give them that definition of success so that they know what the target is they're trying to achieve. And so I find there's often a disconnect between what the manager thinks their employee wants and what the employee actually wants.
And we've heard that both from Ryan and Alina, that they do want to have that anchor, that touch point. Just a bit of a heads up to everybody listening to the panel. This is one last short wrap-up question, and then I'm hoping to hear from some questions for the panelists from you. And we'll start with Joel in this wrap-up question. So what programs, practices, culture matters when it comes to attracting, retaining, and advancing young professionals? And Joel, obviously this is your work, so specific programs are generally speaking what matters. And then Ryan and Alina, what have you seen in your time in your work career that would be a program or a practice that's a little bit more formalized that you feel really matters? So we'll start off with Joel and then go to Alina, then Ryan.
Sure. So I think every organization, or at least every large organization, is going to have some kind of program in place that helps develop their new graduates or their young people that are first entering the industry. To me, the things that are really important to make sure that that program includes clear expectations. Again, really important that they know what success looks like, but also giving them a mentor or even a couple of mentors, people that come from a similar background professionally that they can learn from. I think it's also important to define the different career progression paths. And Ryan touched on this a little bit, that you get that field exposure and then your career can go a number of different ways, whether you become somebody focused on more design or applications work, maybe you go into sales, maybe you feel like a natural leader and you head that direction. I think that giving clear direction on how to get there so that they know what needs to be done is important. And then something that we do that I think is important, every organization is different, but having a self-pacing to the program. If somebody has the initiative and wants to really own their growth and move quickly through their progression and they have the aptitude to do it, there should be the freedom for them to progress quickly. If somebody else feels like they do better if they can, learn a little slower, be a bit more methodical, we also want to offer that opportunity. So I think having that ability to self-pace is important.
Okay, we'll give you some live reaction, Joel, to that through what Alina and Ryan think, either about what you said or what they've seen that matters to them. So Alina, your short time in industry, what matters to you in terms of formalized programs, practices?
I'll be able to combine two things together as a young professional and as a student. I think that attraction and retention will start long before the hiring process starts. So I feel like as I was in the club, I was in the student chapter, I was able to see how when companies are actively engaging with students through internships, through industry tours, and that is what we try to provide all the time. We try to go to industries, we try to showcase what it is to be like when you are actually in the industry, and having guest lectures like Ryan having around, coming in and helping and sharing their knowledge in the field and how they were able to transition from being a student to a young professional. Having mentorship programs and building stronger connections with the future talent is something that I feel will attract and will help improve the advancement of young talent.
Great. Thank you very much. Ryan, what have you seen that you think is important?
Yeah, I don't think I can put it in any better words, kind of the comments that Joel and Alina already made. I do just want to kind of drive that home, the clear expectations, like what does success look like? I've been very fortunate to be mentored and to, as a result, learn to kind of ask those questions up front so I can get an idea for it of what that development looks like, especially when you're new to the industry, because there's just so much that you don't know, right? And that I'd love to say that that is kind of a standard in our industry or an industry in general, like not even just speaking the energy industry, but it seems to be a gap almost universally, just being kind of upfront about what we would like to see, but then having that self-pacing aspect that Joel spoke to, because that really helps you as the manager to separate the wheat from the chaff, right? And gives people those legs to run if they want to. Um, the other thing I wanted to touch on really quick was just the lens for this panel, right? You've got Alina and myself, we're both SAIT graduates, and I think that maybe changes the dynamic a little bit of how some of this could be interpreted. And I say that because SAIT's program is very intentional, right? You take several reservoir engineering classes, you take several completions engineering classes, drilling classes. Like it helps students break down their perception of the industry and then starts to open their minds to avenues where they could work. And most of the professors have a number of years in industry, anywhere from 10 to 30, I would say, if I had to give a range. And candidly, that's just not something I saw during my time at the university. It's much more theoretical, and as a result, if as an organization, if you're not taking the time to get in front of the students and educate and show them like what you do and the value that you bring to the industry, and maybe even a little bit on what the industry looks like as a whole, just to help frame them a little bit, um, it's hard to get that coverage and have that value proposition come across that really helps to, I think, motivate a lot of students when they're looking at a particular industry and the different segments within it.
I find it interesting that you drew a comparison between the intentionality of a SAIT program versus the university program. And what it says to me is that's an opportunity for companies in their onboarding or lunch and learns or whatever to provide people that opportunity to understand the big picture and connect the dots so that they can be more intentional. Um, about what they want and where they want to go. So with that, we'll wrap up the formal part of the panel, and I'd just love to show my appreciation for the three of you for your frankness and reacting to, some questions that were scripted, but, some ideas that I threw in just based on what I thought was interesting, and for sharing, yourself and your experiences with us. So, do we have any questions either in the chat or somebody that wants to raise their hand and pose a question to the panelists before we move on?
There isn't anything in the chat yet, and I don't see any raised hands at the moment. One of the things that I really resonated with me was one of Alina's comments about learning more than just what you do when you're within an organization. I think that really hit home for me. Being a part of larger organizations or really being put in like a box where you kind of just come in and do your job is not is not very interesting, nor do you get the perspective of or understanding what the organization does or how your job impacts down the line, wherever that is, internally or out in the field, is very well, it resonates. It's very true. I think that more organizations need to realize that connecting the dots, knowing the story, and really the whole picture of what the company, the ecosystem really is a factor in how a person sees themselves and the identity they give themselves within their role, and how it translates into other parts of that business. So I think that was a big eye opener for me.
Okay, I'll suggest then, thank you, that if people have questions, we'll try to reserve a little bit of time at the end. So, Pat, do you want to
We do have a question here.
Oh, okay.
From the external survey results shared previously, what age range was used or defined as the young talent? Pat?
So I would say that the data that we shared was from the engineering student body, so within Ontario. So it focused on first year and second year students for the most part. So again, it was, we didn't sort of put a line in the sand in terms of who a young talent had to be. But, in that case, it was first or second year engineers. So, I would say for the most part, they were fairly young, under 25. In terms of some of the other qualitative work that we've done, and I'll show a little bit more before we wrap up, we worked through the young talent associations that are mostly based here in Calgary, so to connect with their members. So, again, we didn't say, young talent is 35 and younger. We kind of just went with, however they defined young talent within their association, that's what we went with too. So can't give you a specific age, or upper level age in terms of where the data came from.
Well, I guess if there are no more questions, if we wanted to keep going, Pat, and then if there's any more questions, just raise your hand or put them in the chat while we does that sound fair to you, Pat? Would that work?
Perfect. We can wrap up things here for sure. So I did just want to wrap up with a little bit about the toolkit that the Talent for Energy team has pulled together. And like I said, we will circulate this so everybody will have an opportunity to take a look at it in more detail. But I just wanted to say that, this work was actually driven by those, that young talent professional organizations that are often, trying to advocate, trying to mentor, on behalf of young talent within the energy industry. And they came to us and said, we get this sense that, some of industry has some perceptions around why young talent may or may not or want to stay in the energy industry. And so they really wanted us to facilitate a process with them to kind of come up with, what will attract and retain talent so that there is opportunity to advance them through careers within the energy industry. So I just wanted to give you a bit of background in terms of how this work came to be. You know what? I'm not going to go into this in detail because again, you'll get the toolkit that goes into this in detail. I just want to say that it was just amazing, as we looked at some of the work that Weatherford's doing and even, things that were brought up in this panel, just how much consistency there was. And so it really helps kind of validate some of the content that's within the toolkit. But this is, we came up with, based on the feedback from young talent, sort of 12 actions that industry can take. And these are, there isn't 12 here, but they kind of roll up around attraction, retention, and advancement. And I would say what you'll also find in the toolkit is that we broke out some, kind of how-tos, what could be done across, kind of the full value chain, the employer life cycle. But we also identified, in terms of attracting, retaining, and advancing young talent and supporting it, what can individuals do? Because sometimes individuals don't feel they maybe have a role in this space, and yet I think we heard that leaders, mentors do not necessarily come with a job title, and that individuals do have an opportunity to impact bringing young talent into the industry and helping them see what their career path might be. There's also kind of how-tos and tools, for managers and supervisors. We heard in spades that managers do matter in terms of attracting and retaining workers. And so there are some, strategies and tactics that managers and supervisors can take. And then we also talk about things that could happen at the organizational level in order to, consider, are there other things that could be implemented organizationally that would enhance the attraction, retention, and advancement of young professionals? So again, lots of good information in there. And I just one addition that I would make to this is that we heard from young professionals, young talent within the energy industry, um, a real interest and desire to be part of this story. So, thinking about who's on panels, who are you sending out, for career fairs or job forums, or, talking to other students or young talent within the industry, because young talent themselves would love to be part of that in terms of promoting and championing, how to build a meaningful career within the energy industry. And then finally, just with the last few minutes left, and we know this is really important to the energy services sector, but across the board, and again, we heard it, the field is where it's just a tremendous career asset, and field work can really be a career accelerator. And even if people think, oh, I'm going to go to the field for a year, they get hooked and, build their career around the field work. So we do, within the toolkit, we just talk a little bit about how field roles are unique and maybe require some unique strategies and tactics in terms of attracting people into the field. So, really promoting or reframing that field work as a career accelerator with the unique opportunities to learn, what happens in the field and connecting the dots. And we heard over and over again that those young talent that has that field experience, it just accelerates their learning and their career so much. And then we heard this too. What is the impact of those field roles, connecting those dots to, the business goals, growth, sustainability, and then, overall impact on, people's daily lives, intentional messaging around that for the field roles. Innovation and tech used in field roles, because there certainly are some perspectives that it's still all labor and grunt work and dirty work. And so really there's an opportunity to really promote the kind of innovation and tech that's being deployed within the field. And I know in some of the work that we've been doing, and I know Joel talked about this too, because field work is, kind of non-routine, and it's it's leveraging technology such as AI and automation, but it's really difficult to replace those field roles with AI or automation. So there is some job security associated with that. Thinking about onboarding, so it's not only how to operate safely and productively, but also how do you build a sense of belonging for that new hire in terms of, where they fit on the team and, feeling comfortable, as Alina said, in terms of asking questions and that kind of stuff. Lots about career pathing, multiple ways to advance into leadership, technical roles, cross-functional. And, for those that are looking to leverage their field experience into an office experience, just looking at those multiple pathways. Schedules and rotations that can be flexible depending on life circumstances. And then what we also heard, certainly inclusive and respectful work environments, but also recognizing when you're attracting to a field role, you're also attracting people to a community. And so not only how does that person in that role fit within the company and but also what's the benefits of perhaps relocating to a smaller or more remote rural community, and what are the benefits in terms of making that move. So again, we're happy to share that toolkit. Thank you so very much for hanging in there with us. I know that some of you probably had to run off at 1 o'clock for meetings, but we really appreciate your time and effort, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or comments following the session.